What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of From the Beginning. I'm your host, Chris Casella, and today I sat down with the founder of 50 West Brewing Company in Mariemont, Ohio. I had a ton of fun with this episode. I actually came straight from 50 West's volleyball league to record our conversation, and we didn't end up leaving the office until sometime after 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night, so it was a really laid-back setting. The guest is super high energy, and he absolutely loves what he does. He has a fantastic story that's full of lessons applicable not only to business, but just to life in general, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it. So instead of talking about it, I'm going to let you get right into the episode. Here is Bobby Slattery's story from the very beginning.
Right now it's like a really, so I'm in like the stressful side of it right now.
Yeah.
So what that means is like, when I go to bed every night, I'm like, oh my God, am I making the right decision? Did I do this right? Oh my God, how are we going to do this? How are we ever going to overcome it? And I've been through this like probably 4 times, and it usually ends up, if I put the hard work in and I put the effort, it almost always ends up okay. But there's always that fear. It's just like you're on a roller coaster going up and you're like, wait, did I think about this? Why did I do this? Like, where would I think? So we've got the ice skating rink going in next week. We've got another brewery opening up probably within the next 3-4 weeks. It's just like, it's a crazy time for us.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll just kind of start off.
Go ahead.
Bobby Slattery, very happy to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We've been in contact, and I've grown up around 50 West, and it's an incredible place. And obviously, you have more than just 50 West on your plate, and you're a busy guy. But I appreciate you being here. Yeah. If you just want to give everybody an introduction, kind of tell them who you are and what some of that stuff you have going on. It might be kind of tough to.
Yeah, no. It's a very loaded question. Who I am. I'm Bobby Slattery. I am the founder of 50 West Brewing Company. I'm also a dad of 3 kids. I got a wife who's wonderful. I got a dog. I'm an ambassador for Lululemon at 38 years old, which I don't think that was ever part of the plan.
I saw that as I was researching. I typed in Bobby Slattery, 50 West, and one of the first things that came up was a 50 West article.
Yeah.
Or a Lululemon article.
Yeah. So it's so I you could say that what else can I tell you about myself? I don't know. I'm 38 years old. I'm a graduate of Ohio University. I went to Indian Hill High School. And yeah, it's kind of an amazing, to me, it's like I have so much more that I want to accomplish in my life, but then there's parts of me that are like, oh my God, how did this all happen? How did we get to this point? Both good and bad. I think one of the coolest things about, getting yourself wherever you are in life, are all the steps that you're taking along the way. So how did you get to these spots? And like, what I would tell you from my standpoint is like, some of my biggest mistakes ended up leading to like what a lot of people view as success now. And it's funny to watch people come through our space and be like, oh my God, how did all this happen? And you're like, well, I screwed up a lot of things. And
you're like, that's a great question.
It ended up kind of working out. You know? I don't know if it's going to work out forever, but for right now, yeah, it's working out. So
yeah. And that's exactly what I want to talk to you about, because I think that's one of the most interesting things about all these successful businesses, especially the ones just locally that we see. And, we kind of just, as a customer, I'll speak from that perspective. We see these businesses go up and we're really excited. We're interested in them. We go and we hang out, and what we don't know, and honestly, we don't even question it very often, is like, how did this come to be? What had to happen for this to actually come to fruition? And that's the stuff that I'm interested in. And I think those have some of the best stories. To your point, a lot of the most profound moments are actually the failures, the mistakes that you go through along the way. And that's exactly what I'm interested in hearing about your story. And, we can actually, if it's okay with you, we'll just go back. And I know before we started this episode, you and I talked about, we touched on your dad was a successful entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, I guess is more accurate.
Yes.
You have a big family, and I'm really curious, just going back to your childhood, what it was like growing up with a father who was so invested in all these different ventures, and, just about your parents, your siblings, just tell me about your childhood.
How we got here.
Yeah, exactly.
So I grew up, my childhood was awesome. I had a fantastic childhood. So I grew up from Cincinnati, born here, went to Indian Hill my whole life. So I was there 13 years. I have 4 brothers and sisters. When I was, my dad was married to my mom. Okay. So I have this perfect balance. I have this weird balance of my mom and my dad. So my dad's a serial entrepreneur, incredible work ethic, like nothing you've seen before. And so that was always part of the family, as positive and as wonderful as it ever be. My mom is she's a family therapist. So you had this weird balance of this like sensitivity meets this like incredible optimism. Their marriage didn't work out. So they got divorced when I was like, I think like 6 or 7 years old.
Okay.
So at that point, my mom moved out of the house. She moved over to Montgomery, married my stepdad at the time. So my stepdad, Mike, who was an English professor, which was incredible because you have the difference between my stepdad and my dad was so dramatic.
I can imagine.
Because you had a guy he was like an expert on the Beatles and Bob Dylan and all of these things that were just like, it was about writing and all these things. It was just the exact opposite of my dad, who was literally like just trying to sell coupons as much as he possibly could. Like he was just like a salesman and incredible, and they were different, but they both taught me different things along the way. And I think ultimately their divorce was really beneficial for me because I grew up, so I'm 13 years, Indian Hill High School from kindergarten to my senior year, right? Like you're a rich kid from Indian Hill that had this.
Yeah.
And so I was exposed to all that. But my mom, so she lived over we moved over to townhouses for a while. So we lived in apartments, townhouses around like the Montgomery area. And my stepbrothers went to SCPA, which was totally different than Indian Hill, right?
Right.
Like that was
like the polar opposite.
Polar opposite.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was being exposed to a lot of those things. And it gave me a sort of a different appreciation for, I don't know, just for different things. And I think that's something that's always been a part of me my whole life is like, I like being around different environments. My friends will tell you I'm like the worst friend in the world. Can I just get bored? Like I'm not like for me, I'm way more intrigued about being in a situation that's outside of my comfort zone where I can just like learn about a different person for short periods of time. So,
right.
So grew up there. I had a brother and a sister. My dad ended up getting remarried to my stepmom, Ellen, who was freaking an amazing human being. So she was 13 years younger than my dad. So when my dad got married, the rumor amongst like my friends and stuff was that she was our babysitter, and my dad ran off with. So at like an age of, I think I was probably like 10 at the time.
I was going to ask, how old are you?
Like I'm probably like 10, right? And so there was like a rumor within the community that my dad had run off with the babysitter, which looking back on it, like my dad was pretty smart. And I think in his mindset, he was building this business, growing this business, like doing all these crazy things with his magazine and all these different business ventures that he would get involved in. And he needed somebody that was like a rock and a foundation that could help take care of us. And so my mom was in the process of going back to school, getting her master's, doing all that stuff. And so Ellen really helped us as that like rock foundation that was like there every day, that like took us to soccer practices and baseball practices and helped us with school. And so I kind of had these two mothers essentially that helped raise us. My mom, when we were at her house, obviously like functioned as a, almost essentially like somewhat of a single mother, working and doing her thing. And my stepdad was there, but just wasn't necessarily the same support arm. And then on the other side, my stepmom, Ellen, was there as like sort of that more traditional mother figure that just, took care of us on making sure that we had our backpacks packed and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So grew up in Indian Hill, went to, I guess from there, my dad ended up, he married Ellen, had two more kids that are technically my half sisters. I hate that word though. Like as far as we're concerned, we are like one big family of five.
Completely relatable. I have an older sister who I just consider my older sister. She's my half sister technically. People learn that and they're like, oh my gosh, like that's your half sister. And I'm like, yeah, but like it doesn't, it's no different.
Don't even say that word.
Exactly.
Like,
right.
So my two sisters came along, and then high school, I was, high school was high school. I guess I had a really positive high school experience. I married my wife. My wife, I met in like grade school.
Wow.
And I was like obsessed with her my whole life. So I think looking back on my life, one of the things that, if you like go all the way back to the beginning,
sure.
One of the things that you'll see with me is like, I'll focus in on something and I won't stop until I figure out how to like make it happen.
Yeah.
So my wife was like that. Like my wife in high school, I was obsessed with her. Right. Like, so for those of you that you've probably been in this situation, but you're a freshman in high school. You can't get girls' attention. Like I was that. I had like my voice didn't change till I was probably like 16, right? I was just like that was like a nightmare. And like all I wanted was this girl's attention and I couldn't get it. And I just like latched onto her and wouldn't leave her alone. So I finally got her to start dating me my senior year of high school.
It took 4 years, huh? Well, I guess maybe longer than that if it was since grade school.
So like I remember the first day I saw her. So the first day I saw her was 5th grade. I was on the bus and it was raining outside. And like I know that sounds like a movie or whatever, but I saw her and there was just like something about her. I was like, okay. And I wasn't really like obsessed with her in that way, but I had like a vivid moment of remembering that. And then we go through high school and like she's kind of there. I kind of become attracted to her. And then there was just a point where it was like, look, this is just a person that I want her to be my girlfriend.
Right.
Badly.
It kind of hits you.
So yeah. So I snuck in as a friend for 2 years, got beat up by like every one of her boyfriends, which I don't feel as bad about because I married her. So I'm like, well, so it wasn't that bad. Like,
exactly.
And then, high school, we were a class couple. Did that whole thing. One of the things when I was in high school, my dad instilled like a really he set up an example of hard work. Like it was a really important thing. And it wasn't like, you need to work hard because this is what you need to do. It was just like, hey, we're hard workers. That's what we do. And it was just like, you were applauded for that. So right. When I was 14, that was when I knew I could get my first job. So I rode my bike down to the Kroger in Madeira. And that was like a big deal for me. So I got a job there and I would ride my bike. I lived about a mile away and I'd ride my bike to work. And I would work there and I was really proud of that. I was never a very good student, but like working, I took a lot of pride in that work. And like, I'll never forget, there were bathrooms in there and like I would pride myself on having the record for cleaning the bathrooms the most. Now I like look at that and I'm like, oh God, like the other kids probably just looked at me like, what are you doing? Like, yeah, go ahead and clean the bathrooms. You can keep the record.
Right.
But for me, that was like a big deal. And then I got a job at a coffee shop. So I did that, Coffee Please in Madeira, which is actually what we named our coffee stout after at 50 West. And yeah, so that was like a big deal. I was a terrible student, was never really that focused on school. And it's probably one of my biggest regrets.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think you lack that focus in school, but you could go and work hard in other areas?
I think it was, so my dad wasn't a good student. And I've thought about this a lot with my own kids. And it was always talked about with us of being like, hey, you know what? Like I didn't get good grades in college, but I figured this out. And I think there was an excitement to me of like, I'm going to do the same thing. Like I can figure this out. I don't need school. I can do this on my own, which is really weird because my other siblings were really good students. And for some reason I just like rebelled against it. And it was, if I put my mind to it, I could excel or at least appear to be excelling within an environment of like, you put me in a class. If I put effort into it, I can make it work. But I just was so dead set on like, look, I'll figure this out on my own and I'll do minimal amounts of work. And I really regret that. I wish that I didn't do that. That went all the way through college. Like I never was good. So
what do you regret the most about that? Just looking back, I mean, because obviously someone who's so successful and has accomplished so much now, looking back at
it limited so many opportunities.
Yeah.
Like, it was just stupid. Like you can't, and it's almost something so my dad was one of 10 kids and I think it's 36 cousins from that side. I mean, we just make babies. Like that's just what that family does. My grandma, like it's this incredible thing to look at these photos.
Yeah. That was one of the biggest things I noticed was how big your family was when I was looking it up.
It's enormous. Yeah. It's crazy.
It is.
And watching my grandma was, her and I were actually like really close I played on this baseball team in high school it was high school. It was like middle school, high school. We lost I think we played like 40 games a season and we would lose like 39 and she would go to every game and just watch us get crushed. But
that's amazing.
It was neat to watch her, having 10 kids. If you could sit there and watch her day, it was incredible. It was like phone call after phone call. Hey, this is Billy calling from Pittsburgh. And now I'm talking to Tim in Colorado and all of these just people. When you create that many people, there's a lot of stories and a lot of things happen in your life consistently. Right. Now, granted, as a parent now, I can't imagine trying to raise 10 kids. Like there's got to be psychological issues that came in of just all those people and how do you feed them and make them feel special.
It's a full-time job plus another full-time job in and of itself.
Yeah. But the consistent message within the Slattery family was like, we can we don't really need school. Like we can kind of we'll figure this out. We're salesmen. We're entrepreneurs. We can do this stuff. So my mind was always thought around that, was always sort of dedicated to like, oh, I'm going to figure out my own thing. I can figure out how to do this. And it was instilled at me at like a relatively young age. And I was like naive and stupid enough to sort of take that bait. Because looking back, like education, it just opens up so many doors for you.
Right.
And for me to shut those doors, like I'm very fortunate to be in the position that I'm in today. But I think I closed a lot of doors that weren't necessary. Like I could have accomplished more things.
Yeah.
I might have ended up in the same spot that I am now, but I think that there's, it's just dumb. Like education is such an incredible tool. And ultimately I think like, if you look at all, it's the greatest equalizer we have, right? Like when you look at the difference between, like extreme poverty rates and drastic changes,
Yeah.
a lot of that is the lack of education that causes that. And so to have access to go to this incredible school like Indian Hill that essentially, if you get good grades there, the sky's the limit, right? Like you're going to go wherever you want. I had that opportunity granted to me and I didn't take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And I really regret that because there's a lot of people out there that don't have that same opportunity. And it's like, I wasted it and I threw it away.
Yeah. That's completely understandable. And I was kind of the same way in high school and I never really applied myself. And I guess, I looked at it a little bit differently. I looked at it like this stuff that I'm learning isn't pertinent to my situation. It's not going to determine whether or not I'm successful in life. Like you guys don't know what you're doing. You're wasting your time by putting in so much effort. And I tried in college. I did okay in college because I figured I'm taking finance courses. I want to work in finance. This is directly related to how successful I'm going to become. So I'm going to learn it all. I've come to regret my lack of effort in high school because from a different angle. And I think that, the way that you look at it is kind of inspiring just in the sense that, not everybody does have that opportunity. But the way that I looked at it was here I am now. And I'm just now figuring out really how to put my brain to work and how to think critically and how to study for long hours at a time. And that's a requirement to being successful. You really have to go in and if nothing else, just to focus. And I never focused in high school. I was always like, I'll get it done. I'll do it the morning of.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do my homework. I'll just study for the test. And I'm going to have everybody help me with my English papers, whatever it may be. And now here I am on my own and nobody's going to do my job for me. Nobody's going to help me be successful or, do my study for me on a late night. It's going to be me. And so that's how I've always looked at it. But your point about the equal opportunity, somebody who doesn't have the access to that education. And we just kind of went through, and I went to Mariemont, which is a rival of Indian Hill, very similar situation. Yes. And I think you really, you opened up my eyes just in the sense that like, I kind of threw that away when somebody else didn't even have the opportunity.
There's no sense in closing doors if you don't have to, right?
Right.
Like leave them open. That's what. So I stress that with my kids right now. I mean, I got young kids. They're 8, 6, and 3. So a bad test isn't going to ruin it for them. But I think for them, I really want to stress. My wife's family is very education oriented. Like she comes from a line of people that were doctors and lawyers, and education was stressed from day one. And I want to make sure that that's instilled in my kids, and not like, hey, you have all these other talents that you're just like. Our family was always just like, we have all these other talents that we can utilize. And I think focus. So for me, I did choose to focus on things. I just picked things that didn't matter, right? Like I always use video games as an example. I think video games, I love them. I have a massive addiction to them. They're so destructive in my life. Like it was almost like a drug problem when I look back on it. It's like what they did was they gave me a false sense of accomplishment that I could put my time and effort into.
Right.
That when I look back on it, it was like, oh my God, look at all these things accomplished. And then you turn the system off and you're like, wait, that is nothing. Like you did nothing there. But in my mind, I was making accomplishments there. I had strange accomplishments in college. Terrible student again. My focus in college was based around, I'm just like your typical, I was in a fraternity and I did that whole thing. And my focus in college, I was really, I loved that fraternity lifestyle. I loved it. I think it's actually like all these fraternities are being thrown off. And what I loved about it was a really great structure for learning. So I think it's unfortunate that a lot of these fraternities are being thrown off campus. And I think people's interpretation of Greek life can get misconstrued because we think of it as just like, oh, it's, you're paying for your friends and you're doing this and that and whatever. But what I loved about it was like the structure. Like one of the coolest things our fraternity had us do was like, we had to learn every single person by name, and we had to know like all this different, what's their hometown, what's their favorite food. Like they would give us stupid stuff. Like they would list hobbies, and these guys would just list random stuff. But like I spent so much time memorizing that thing about each individual person. And that's like a critical, critical skill in life. Like when you're working in business and things like that, being able to remember things about people and those things that they were teaching us were really good. And also the structure of sort of pledgeship and working your way up, like that's how business works, right? Like you start at the bottom and you do the jobs that you're not supposed to do.
Yep.
And then you get to reap the benefits. You know, in college, it was 4 years later, right? Like we had to be up in the morning, 7 a.m., cleaning some guy's apartment. And at the time it's like, this is horrible, but it also kind of became like the most fun part. When you look back on it, you're like, oh my God, remember how funny that was. And we were so mad and we had to do this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then when you get older, like your apartment would get cleaned, right? And like, that wasn't when I look back at college, like that wasn't the best part. It was like, oh, when I was a senior, my apartment got cleaned. Like it was do you remember how mad we were when we went into these people's apartment and we had to clean it up or whatever? So, I don't know. At college, I really embraced that. So I actually had so I never got kids. There was never any kids cleaning my apartment when I got senior year, because I was responsible for getting a fraternity thrown off campus, which is a whole other story that we
Is that right?
Yeah. So so I was a social chair. And I was good at it. I was like, this is what I want to do.
I believe you.
This is, you know, I knew how to do it. I knew how to navigate. I knew what we were doing. So,
yep.
When we got to college, I was a Sigma Chi, and we'd gotten in trouble for wherever. I went to Ohio University, fantastic school, great experience. I don't think that I took the most out of it though. I get to go back there all the time now, and there's all these things that I'm like, wait, why wasn't I doing this? Like I was focused on other aspects, but what ended up happening at OU, terrible grades whole way through. And I would get good grades when I needed to. So getting back to my wife, we broke up when we went to college. But we still talked every single day, and we get together whenever we could. And when I'm in college, when I had to get good grades. So she was going abroad. In order to go abroad, I had to get good grades. So you can look at my college transcripts, and every time I had to get good enough grades to do something, like I would do it. And then it'd be like spring quarter of the next fall, and it would just fall off a cliff.
Right.
My focus was off. But back to the fraternity thing. So when I'm in college, I decided to throw this party, and it was going to be a high school dance themed party. So what I did was I had all of our pledges dress up as like, we had them dress up all these crazy things. But what we did was we took over somebody's apartment and decked it out like it was somebody's parents' house. Okay. And the plan is that you were going to drink at the parents' house before going to the high school dance. Okay. So everybody's drinking there. Then I used the university buses. Somehow I got them to give us the buses, and the pledges showed up as police, and we're like, hey, you guys gotta leave. I'm sorry. No, it was parents. You guys got to leave. Like we're back or whatever. And so we get into the university buses, and there was a local YMCA. They just built a brand new one. Well, I went to the guy who was in charge of the YMCA, and they had the old YMCA just sitting there. So I was like, look, I'm with a fraternity. I want to rent your YMCA. Can you, like, here's some cash. Nobody's going to know about this.
Nobody's going to know about
Would you do this? And he's like, yeah, sure. So he took the cash.
Right.
So when you walked in there, it said Sigma Chi High, and it was decked out. And we had 4 different things of punch. So we had freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. And each one we went and got Everclear from West Virginia, because at OU you're right across the river, and for whatever reason, like you can't get Everclear in Ohio. So we had each set up as each like freshman was the least amount, going to senior, which was the most amount of Everclear. So when you walked in the door with your date, you got breathalyzed, and if you didn't blow high enough, you had to go to the principal's office, which was nothing but like shots and crazy stuff.
Did you come up with all this stuff on your own?
Yeah.
Was this like something you looked up and it was like?
This is how my head works. Like here's the thing: like at that point in time, the internet didn't like exist like it does now.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I just like, this is how my brain works. Right?
This is amazing.
This is all relevant to what I do now for a career. But in college, like I probably should have been focused on something else other than thinking about a lot of stuff. So you blew, and then if you made it through that point, we had like the balloon arches, and you got your picture taken. And then, so you went to the principal's office till you could blow high enough to get in. And then whoever blew the 2 highest were deemed the king and queen, and they danced to We Are the Champions, and everybody applauded. Like looking back on it,
they danced or crawled
fell
or
over.
fell over.
I mean, it was just like, it was, I'm so lucky that nothing really terrible happened that night.
Right.
So what ends up happening is one guy, we had everybody get bussed back, and we go back to the bars, and everybody's just like, this is great or whatever. And one guy like got in a fight with his date and decided he was going to haze the pledges for some reason back at this thing. And they got into confrontation. Well, then a janitor from the other YMCA saw the confrontation. Is like, wait, who's in there? They called the police. They walked in and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, Sigma Chi High. Like, what is this? So at that point in time, I called my dad, who's always has been my reference for everything. And I'm like, what do I do? And he's like, shut your phone off. Don't go back to your apartment for like a week and like wait for this to blow over. Like that was his advice. As a parent, his advice was, because like the police are like looking for me. They're like trying to figure this thing out. And his advice was like, just go hide somewhere.
Go dark.
Yeah. Just go dark and
off the grid.
No one will find you. So I think I just stayed in somebody's apartment for like a week and cried to myself every night because the fraternity's getting thrown off campus and all these bad things are happening. But I didn't end up going to jail or anything like that at all. The fraternity took the brunt of it, which sucked. Like that was a bummer because for me that was one of the things that I loved about college.
Yeah.
And so my senior year we didn't get pledges because at that point we were just what was left over and we threw our own parties and it was what it was.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that sounds like an amazing time though. I wish that you were my social chair in college.
It was. Were you in a fraternity?
I was in Pike at UC for a few years.
Okay.
And so I was there for 5 years with the co-op program at UC, and so for the last 2 years I wasn't in a fraternity, but all my friends were. Yeah. The people that I met in Pike and the people that I went and pledged with. So
it's a bummer that colleges are doing away with them. I think it's. Like I said, there was just a lot of good structure and a lot of good things. There were a lot of bad things too. And I think that's why these things are going away, right? Like,
and I think that, I think that's a great point. And one of the reasons I think is, the structure that is in place can be used. It all goes back to how you use it or how well you take advantage of it. Not everybody thinks the way that you do, where they see the way that you have to put in the work in the beginning and then it kind of pays off in the end. And, you're scrubbing the bathrooms, then somebody else is scrubbing yours.
You also are giving guidelines to like 19-year-old kids to interpret. So like there were a lot of misinterpreted things that were bad things that were being done, not because these people were bad people, because they're just 19-year-old kids. But I think that if you look at all, like there's a lot of positives that came out of that. And I think that structurally it's unfortunate they're going away. And I think that when I was navigating through that system, that was always something I looked at as like, who were the people older than me that were doing this for a good purpose, and who were the ones that like didn't understand what they were doing with it.
Right.
And like, I'll never forget a guy lining us up as pledges. He made us play a game called Pick Your Friends. So he'd pull one person out, and it's like 7 a.m. We're cleaning. He probably didn't go to bed the night before and just decided that he was going to do this. And he said, "Okay, we're going to play Pick Your Friends." So he'd pull one person out and go, "Pick your best friend." So he'd make you pick your best friend, and that guy would come and go, okay, you can't pick him. There's the line out there, pick your best friend, till there was one guy left. And then he would just lace into this kid and tell him like, 14 people here, and not one of them will say and you're just like, oh my God, like that's so terrible to do to like a young kid, right? Like that's not good. That's not a good way to do it. But there were a lot of people that I think use the structure for good, and that's what's unfortunate with that going away. But
yeah. And even to your point, you talked about how important it was to be able to remember people's names, or remember important facts about them. And honestly, that just all goes back to building relationships. If you really think about it,
the structure was like it was well set up. I don't know who it was. I can't. Some college kid thought of this like forever ago. But that to me it was a piece that I just don't think you can get that in your general classes, right? Like you're not, it's one of those things that the structure makes sense with setting you up for later in life. So did that, barely graduated from college. So back to, so at that point in my life, I went from my freshman year, like I just killed my freshman year. I did really well. Like when I say that, like socially, I just excelled. Sophomore year, I got introduced to marijuana, and basically like it was one of the worst things that I could have ever been introduced to. So from that standpoint, I smoked too much pot. Like I was your typical kid that was like, I'm on a trajectory, I'm partying, I'm having fun. And then I started not having fun. And part of that I think was I turned to weed, and it just people always say weed's not really that destructive a drug. For me, it was very destructive. Like I think I started to use it as a way to like get away from reality, right? Like I had a lack of focus and whatnot. So, I mean, things are still good sophomore, junior year, but by senior year, I was just like in a funk where I'm smoking weed. I'm not going to graduate from college. I am way overweight. So I've always been in pretty good shape my whole life.
Yeah.
I'm like way overweight. I
never would have guessed.
Oh God, it was bad. And so getting back to my wife. So my wife, she always says I'd be in the gutter if it wasn't for her. And she's 100% right about that. But so here I am my senior year and we're supposed to be graduating. And I'm not graduating. Like, I'm not even close to graduating. As a matter of fact, I think I'm on academic probation. I'm about to get kicked out of school. So I realized that summer, I took a year's worth of classes in a summer session. Like, if you look at my transcript, I was showing it to somebody the other day and they're just like, wait, how did you even do this?
Just to graduate.
So I knew that if I wasn't going to graduate, my wife was going to break up with me.
Huh.
And so I was like, I have to figure out a way to impress her. Keep in mind, I'm just like getting high all the time and eating food and I look terrible. And probably everything about her is like, I got to get rid of this person.
But you guys have gotten back together.
No.
At this point?
No, I just have this vision that we're going to get back together because we're going to both graduate from college and we were going to move to Chicago together. That was the goal. So I looked at myself and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to flunk out of school. Her parents are going to be like, this guy's such a loser. You got to get rid of him. And so somewhere in my head, I just made up this idea that I was going to graduate from college. So I was going to run the Chicago Marathon and I was going to get a job. I was going to do those three things. And I was going to make all that happen over summer. Keep in mind, I'm not a runner. Like my whole life, I've been like people would laugh at me the way I ran. And so I just did it. I started with 1 mile. And I just built on the 1 mile, made it 2 miles to 3 miles. My classes, I was just taking classes like straight through. I was living in a friend's apartment that didn't have electric because I just didn't want to go to my parents and tell them that I needed money to pay for my electric bill.
Yeah.
And so I just I made that my dead set goal. And then, so I end up accomplishing, I graduated from college. I didn't really believe it. Like up until I just went and got I'm 38 years old. I just got my college transcripts about 8 months ago. I was in Athens and I was like, I got to go get this because I had these nightmares that I didn't graduate. So I went and paid $20 to see it for real. Cause all I ever got was just a diploma in the mail one day. And I was like, I did it, I guess.
Right.
I'm not going to look because it says here that I did it. So I don't want to see that I did it wrong. So I end up, I graduate, I'm done. I'm ready to now run a marathon in Chicago and I'm ready to move to Chicago. And my wife tells me that she's going to move to Washington, D.C. I'm like, well, no, we said we were moving to Chicago. She's like, well, I got a job in Washington, D.C. And I was like, well, this is different than the plan that I had in my head, but okay, I can move to Washington, D.C. Well, I had a buddy, a good friend of mine. This is so messed up in the way I think. I told him that I was going to move to Chicago with him. So when I told him that I was moving to DC, he's like, you can't do that. You told me you were going to move to Chicago. And I went to my wife and was like, well, I told Nick, she's my girl, not even my girlfriend at the time, person of interest. I was like, well, I told Nick that I'd move in with him. And that was my decision-making process. It wasn't like Nick was the best friend in the world over her. She was way more important, but I made this, I told him I was going to do it. So I was like, I got to follow through on this. I think in her mind, she was probably like, this is great. I'm going to go get to live in DC by myself. He's not going to bug me. And then I was like, okay, well now I just got to get that job and do this. And so I got a job in Chicago at careerbuilder.com. I would pick up the phone and dial 200 calls a day. But when I went there, somebody had told me about this thing called the Wienermobile. You know what the Wienermobile is?
The Oscar Mayer Wienermobile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're like, you should do that. And I was like, yeah, I should do that.
Do that as in be the driver.
You should be on the Wienermobile. That's what you should do.
Who told you that?
I don't know. Somebody told me. I think it was my mother-in-law or somebody was like, you should do that. And I was like, yeah, I would be good at that. I'm good at that. And so I moved to Chicago. I run the marathon. I get a job. I'm living with my buddy Nick, and I'm just making those phone calls. And I applied to this company that did event marketing. It was called Marketing Works. And they called me up one day. And so literally I'm in the middle of just being hung up on. And anybody that's done that sales job, it's a great thing. Everybody should do that one point in their life. Yeah. Those sales calls, making hard sales calls is it's a good skill for everybody in life to have. Cause it's hard. It's not fun. But a lot of people will do, you can make a lot of money doing something like that.
Right. What do you think it teaches you when you think about something like that? A job where you're just constantly calling and getting hung up on. People are saying, F you, don't call me anymore.
Yeah, rejection's a good, it teaches you not to be afraid of rejection, right?
Yeah.
It teaches you that. It teaches you how to think quick on your feet. There's nothing better than that when you actually gets through and they're not hanging up on you and you're like, oh my God, this is going to happen. I'm actually going to make this happen. So it was great. And meanwhile, so I'm in those phone calls and I get a call from this company and they're like, hey, I had applied there right when I got there, but there were no jobs. Well, they're like, would you be interested? We're doing this tour for Verizon Wireless. You would get a Hummer and you would go to concert and sporting events all over the country, live in hotels. Like, does that sound like something you'd be interested in? And I was like, yeah, like that
sounds amazing.
That actually sounds like I'm 23 years old. Yes. Like that would be exactly what I want to do with my life. And so I went in and I interviewed and I ended up getting that job. And so I quit the job at Career Builder and then I went and lived in hotels for like, I don't know, it was like a year on the road. It was crazy. It was like, so they paired me up with another girl, Sarah. She was incredible. She had previously really smart, went to Western Michigan, was in the process of, she didn't know if she wanted to go to law school. She wasn't sure what she wanted to do. And so it was just the two of us on the road and she hated me so much. Like it was, what it was, that got me, like, prepared me for marriage. It sounds weird, but when you have to live with a person it was just her and I city to city. So we'd be on tour with like, I would be on tour with Gwen Stefani and they would send us into like, I don't know if you remember, do you remember ringback tones?
Yeah.
Okay, so like ringback tones were introduced. iPhone's not out at this point. So we would just like go into the city of Chicago and they would have like ringback tones and we would jump out of a Hummer. Like you'd be walking down the street and be like, hey, can you tell me what ringback tone this is? And they'd be like, Gwen Stefani Bananas. And we're like, you just won tickets tomorrow night to meet Gwen Stefani at her concert, front row. Like, meet us here at this point.
Yeah.
And people would be like, what? This is crazy.
Are you recording this? Is this being filmed or like?
No, this was just their marketing strategy. Verizon Wireless like decided.
Just these individual people off the road.
So we were like the people that, then we'd go to the concert and we'd do the meet and greet. And then we would go and we would like high five people for t-shirts.
Yeah.
So it was just doing that. Right.
Yeah.
But Sarah and I were together the whole time. Right. So what was so funny, after I ran this program, I ended up managing this program. And what I found out from managing it, so when we were out there, I think there were like 6 of these Hummers. It ended up being like 50 of these, and there was a Hispanic program and all this stuff. But when I would manage the program, what you found out was it was always a guy and a girl. And I would say about 70% of the people, maybe even higher, might have been 90%. At one point in time, you would get a phone call from the two people being like, look, I get along with everybody in the world. I don't get along with this person. And what it is the dynamic between guys and girls are so different. And that's what makes marriage so hard, is it's a real challenge to learn how to do that. And what's so interesting with Sarah and I is like, we never made that phone call. We went through like, it was literally like a marriage that we were like balancing out. And there was a point in time where it was just like, she was so upset with me and like, I was upset with her and like, we couldn't figure this out. And it was just the difference in a dynamic between a guy and a girl and trying to work through a relationship. But by the end of it, like I had all these flaws in my life at that time, and to have somebody that was there with me every single day. So I would do like immature lies, right? Like I would tell small lies that didn't need to be lied about, but I would do it. I don't know why, but she was there every day and she would basically be like, that's not true. Like, so she was like recognizing all these flaws within myself that allowed me as a person to really grow. And like, for me, I got to just like, it was so important. Like when I look back at that, it was like getting to be in a marriage before you actually have to be in a marriage, because now I'm in this relationship with my wife and the fact that I got to do this trial run that basically like scrubbed a lot of flaws out of me. Like I'm forever grateful to her. She was incredible. Like
she held you accountable, which is really hard.
That's exactly right. That's what she was doing, was like holding me accountable for being responsible and things like that. And she was super, like she was the opposite of me. Like I would wake up and be like, look, we're in this city for one night. We're going and we're getting drunk, we're having fun. And she would take part in that. But then like the next day when we had to be responsible, she was there like shaking me, like, get up, you idiot. Like we have responsibilities that we have to take care of. You know what I mean? And, and I think that was, it was a huge part of my life. Like she was so important in so many ways, and I don't see her anymore. So back to beer, she introduced me to Bell's Brewery. Like, so this is 2000 and probably like 4 or 5. And she went to Kalamazoo, Western Michigan. That's where Bell's is. She tells me about Oberon and this big launch day and all this stuff. And so like, that was my first experience really seeing a brewery and seeing like people get excited about it. Because in that neck of the woods, breweries were like a big thing there. They've grown even grander than they were then. But yeah, so that was like one of my first experiences to breweries and seeing that. And then the other thing that job really did for me was I got to travel the whole country. So I got to see everything. So that's when I started, you would see these different breweries and these different concepts of things that were existing. And they always joke that Mark Twain said that he wants to die in Cincinnati because it's 10 years behind everybody else. So when the idea of a brewery was being discussed, it was like, oh yeah, like this is going to work. Like Cincinnati needs this.
It sounds like opportunity.
They haven't gotten this yet. So lived in Chicago, which I moved to Chicago because Cincinnati didn't have the opportunity for me that I wanted. And I think that was when I came back to Cincinnati, that was one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to take Bobby Slattery at 23 years old and let's keep him in Cincinnati, right? Like let's figure out how to make this an appealing city and bring all those great things that these other towns had.
Yeah. And kind of create the opportunity for yourself.
Well, not for me, but for
other people.
So yeah, like for me, like at this point, when I came back here, I was like 29, 30 or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was more about like, hey, I want these kids to graduate from college to not say I'm going to Chicago. They're going to come here because we have all these great things happening.
Right.
And in 2003, 2004, Cincinnati had like it was like an inferiority complex. Like you would go to these places and you're like, is this cool? Is this not cool? What is this? Like,
yeah.
And I think that like Facebook and stuff didn't really exist. I think I got my first Facebook account. Actually, I remember it was when I was in Chicago, probably like 4 or 5 months into Chicago. My little brother was in Indiana and he's like, dude, you should check this thing out. It's called Facebook. You have to have a college email or whatever. And so I think that like Facebook and social media has changed that a lot because people can see stuff everywhere. But at the time, like I couldn't see it. I went and saw it all firsthand for myself. And it was this amazing experience that like it shaped my life. And getting back to being in being around different stuff. Like I'm a very stereotypical person, right? Like I went to Indian Hill High School and I was in a fraternity but like if you get into what like I get excited about, like when I was on tour, so I think I was at Justin Timberlake's first concert, like literally ever as a solo artist, which at the time I remember being there for work and it was the same night as the national championship football game. And I was looking around like, what guy in their right mind is at this thing right now, right? Like, why are you at Justin Timberlake? Like the football national championship game's on. Yeah. I'm sitting here at the guy from NSYNC who's now gone solo. But like, so I got to see cool things like that. I was on tour with Green Day, which was amazing. But my favorite things looking back on it, there was a guy named Seven. So he was take Justin Timberlake, but like he was the Korean version. So they took all the stuff this is when after Justin Timberlake's like famous at this point.
Okay.
So he's a Korean version. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm in San Francisco for this thing. It's the closest I've ever been to the Beatles. We're doing a signing with this guy and girls are like literally trying to punch through glass to get to him. And then we went to this concert afterwards and it was all like a Korean, everybody there was Korean except for me. I'm like sitting there like just smiling to myself like, oh my God, I'm a white suburban kid from Cincinnati, Ohio. And I'm in this crazy scenario that I never would have imagined I would ever been to.
Right.
And this is so neat. LL Cool J, I saw him at the Fillmore. This is like LL Cool J past his prime. I mean, I've never seen the crowd. It was mostly middle-aged black women, and LL Cool J is like coming out on stage. Before he came out on stage, they were ready to like tear his clothing off.
Yeah.
Like the whole crowd, that was the dynamic of the crowd, was mostly middle-aged black women that were excited. They remember LL from when he was like in his heyday.
Right.
And he came out and the energy inside that place, like unlike anything.
How far past his heyday? How many years would you say?
So LL Cool J was Mama Said Knock You Out was probably what, like 93, 94. Okay. This is 2007.
Yeah.
Okay. So well past his heyday.
Right. You can just see that audience who is aged with him.
That was what was so cool about it. It was like the dynamic was like it was women. It was black women, right? Like I would never go to a concert. Like if I were to just pick by myself, like I'm not just gonna say, hey, you know what I'm gonna go do? I'm gonna go see an LL Cool J concert.
Right.
Like, and so being able to be around that dynamic and the energy that was like, they had a DJ up on stage and these girls are just going like, they're like, bring him out. And I'm like almost scared for LL Cool J. I'm like, oh my God, when he gets out here, this is gonna be nuts. But
yeah,
I got to be in so many, I worked on the Verizon Wireless Hispanic tour. I ended up being in charge of that for the Western segment of the United States. And like that culture was just so fantastic. Going to just all of the different festivals and things that would happen. I'd always go back to like, I'm a suburban white kid from Cincinnati, Ohio, and I get to be in this environment. Like, this is so cool. And I cherished it. Like, I loved it. I would love being able to be in those scenarios that I'd never like go to my buddies and say, hey, what do you guys want to go to this weekend? And so, it opened my eyes to so many different things. And it was just such a cool thing. So did that in Chicago. And then my wife and I got engaged. So got engaged to my wife. And we decided, I called my dad, right? Like, so I'm like, okay, I want to move back to Cincinnati eventually. We're going to want to have kids, do this thing. So my dad's got a lot of good things going in Cincinnati. So I'm like, hey, just got engaged. We probably want to move back when we start having kids here in a couple of years. And he calls me the next day and he's like, I want you to come back and run a restaurant for me. And I'm like, Dad, I don't know how to run a restaurant. Like, I worked at Kroger. I worked in the coffee shop. I was dishwasher for the coffee shop. People had a restaurant across the street, but like, that's as close as I've been to a restaurant.
Right.
I'm like, why don't I go get work in restaurants in Chicago for a little bit and then I'll come back? He's like, no. I need you to come back right now. So what had happened was he owned the real estate on a restaurant that the guy tried to open up another one. Then that one went under. And then it essentially, like, all of a sudden he had this restaurant he had to figure out. So he's looking at his idiot son in Chicago and it's like, okay, you want to come back here? I got an opportunity. Come figure this out for me right now.
Exactly.
So I went to my wife and was like, I've got this amazing opportunity. We're going to move back to Cincinnati and I'm going to get to run this restaurant. And my wife's like, I don't want to go to Cincinnati. She's like, I want to stay in Chicago. And so what we agreed to was that when we got married, she would move back to Cincinnati. So for 6 months, I would work at the restaurant all week, and then I would close it on Saturday nights. I would take the megabus for $1. The megabus was, you know what the megabus is?
Yeah.
Okay. So they used to offer dollar fares, and I would get every one of them. And so I would take the megabus after I closed down. I would take the megabus back up to Chicago, and then would stay with her. Wake up there Sunday morning, would be with her Sunday, Monday, and then would take the bus back Tuesday morning, right back into work.
Wow. That's an underrated challenge in a relationship is the timing, right? Maybe it's not underrated, but it's so significant. So the fact that you guys were able to make that work and you just said, we're going to split the difference. And obviously, I mean, it wasn't easy. You're closing down the restaurant and then going back and forth. Like in college, I dated a girl who went to Ohio State and I went to UC. We would take the Greyhound our freshman year, when she didn't have a car. And, but it's tough. It is tough, especially at that time in your life.
I know you're just trying to balance it, right? Like
right.
For me, it was probably the best thing ever. I got to focus in on work. I didn't have, like, I could just, it was like two separate things. I would just go work. And then I could go focus on her. So we came back here. It was Slat's Pub is the name. Slat's is still there. And so I ran that restaurant and it was such a different culture. It was so different from when I was in, Chicago. I really did a good job. I did a really good job I learned how to manage. I was good at motivating people. I was fun to be around. I worked for an incredible company. That company that I was working for was growing. It was all young people. We were all growing. We had so many cool things that they were doing. They did this thing called so it was a poetry party. So what they would do for Christmas every year is you would write a poem about another person and then you would read it in front of the whole group. And it was just this incredible synergy that was happening. And the sad part is, like, with a company like that, they kept growing and growing, and eventually, like, the good parts have to go away.
Yeah.
Because it was like all of a sudden the wrong person gets their hands on the poem and then it just falls
exactly
apart. But it was so fun to be a part of that culture. So I'd come back here and I'd go to work at the restaurant. Well, I just assumed that, like, the same thing that worked in Chicago at this young company that I'm working for is going to work in a restaurant. And I couldn't have been more wrong.
And when you say running the restaurant, you mean like full ownership, managing the entire operation?
That's the thing about my dad. So you get back to him. So for those of you that aren't familiar with him, the guy, he was in Valpak franchises, which are the coupon mailers. He started a thing called Reach Magazine, which sold coupons again. And what happened with those businesses, he was selling into all these different businesses. So he exposed himself to all these different things. So along the way, he opened up like a travel agency and he opened up a pet containment company and he just kept going and going and going and going. And so I think when you look at my dad, like, what's crazy about him is, he just told me, like, here's this restaurant, go make it happen. That was it. It wasn't, and it was never bad job. Ever. I don't think my dad has ever said in my life, bad job. He's never said that to me. I've done a bad job plenty of times. The guy has never said, it's always like, you're doing great. Good job. And there's been times where, like, I'm definitively doing a bad job.
Yeah.
Here. Like, financials aren't working out. We can't figure this. Restaurants are really hard. It's a really hard business. And like, when I was there trying to figure that all out, and from a culture standpoint, there was a lot of things that I was trying to implement, but it was just it's the needs and wants in a restaurant. So one of the hardest parts in a restaurant, I would say, is when you're managing front of house. Like, you're paying the front of house, but you're not paying them. They're really getting their money from their tips, right? Yeah. So it kind of affects the dynamic of how that flows. And trying to learn how to balance that was like an extreme challenge for me. And keep in mind, I'm just like some young kid whose dad, I walk in and it's like, look, my daddy just handed me this. I'm sure all these people are like, this guy's terrible.
Which is an obstacle in and of itself to overcome that respect.
Yeah. Like they're like, who? So I think, with me, hard work's always been a thing. Like, that was just taught, like, look, you just work hard and that's what you do. And hard work will help you with respect. If you want to earn somebody's respect, work hard. Work hard and listen to them, I think are two of the biggest pieces that'll earn those things. And so anyway, so I ended up there, ran that restaurant for a couple of years for my dad. And then he went and opened up a beach volleyball place that I was like, don't do this. Doesn't make sense. Then I was like, okay, let me do it. Let me fix it. Whatever. So I went in and tried to operate it. You were in Mariemont?
Yeah. Is this Hahana Beach? Yeah.
How old were you when Hahana Beach existed?
I think probably around middle school, maybe a little bit before. And when that opened up, I had the same kind of mindset you did in the beginning. I was like, that's never going to work. That's crazy. It's Cincinnati. The weather changes so much. You know, how are they going to make this happen? And then I spent so much time at Hahana Beach, I can't even, count the hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like Hahana Beach was so flawed on so many levels. So like, I can tell you, I know all of this now. At the time, like, no idea. So what was so flawed with Hahana, outside of the weather piece of it, like that's a big piece, right? Like, hey, half your season, it doesn't exist. So our thought process with it was, well, we'll build a restaurant that can exist for the whole time, right? The problem is that if you work in the service industry, you'll understand this, but there's a timing and a flow to sitting down at a sit-down restaurant. And when your customers leave in the middle of that flow to go play volleyball for an undetermined amount of time and then decide to show up whenever, it leads to horrendous service. And so we would we built this wide open space too, and it would be like dead. And then all of a sudden, like a 3 kids soccer teams would just show up, and there was never like a consistent flow to it. So we were just consistently in the weeds and getting our butts kicked.
That's incredible to hear that perspective, because from my viewpoint, I was one of those kids soccer teams. It was always lacrosse or football, but we would come immediately after.
Yes.
We would sit down and we would just be absolutely, we'd be so hungry because we just played all these games.
And there's like no food.
And our parents were tired from taking us from place to place, and they're sitting there and they just, they want to drink, they want to eat food. And it would take a while to get the
orders
food.
Would be messed up. Well, because here's the way a regular restaurant works. So let's say you come in with your group of like, there was probably like 30 of you, right?
Right. Just a huge group.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys are hungry coming from the games.
Yeah.
Your parents are tired. They want to go home, right? They've been at soccer games all day. So the way to make that work is everybody has to sit down in a chair and don't move. Okay. Because we're going to take all your orders and then we're going to put them in the orders of the chairs. Well, all the kids would leave and go play in the playland that we built for them, which is understandable.
Right.
Then they would show back up to get their food, and it would be like, your buddy would take your cheeseburger.
They're all in different seats.
And they're all in different seats. And then it would lead to just like this, like people just yelling, like, this is so terrible. And you're just like, oh my God, this is really, really a horrible experience for everybody.
Right.
And so it ultimately, like, it was a flawed concept.
Because just to be clear, the food was really good. We always had a great time.
Sometimes.
Maybe
chicken fingers were really good.
And that's honestly, maybe I was biased. That's what we would get. Yeah, we loved
chicken
it.
Fingers were
and the honey mustard. It was all great.
Yes.
And we had a great time going and playing in the sand and everything. But the one piece of it was just the timing.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
I know the answer. And like ultimately, like that's part of the reason the Burger Bar is so successful is like because I had probably your parents yelling at me, telling me, or your friends' parents. And you just like, you kind of look at it and you go, oh, well, this is why this is never going to work. This is why this doesn't work. And ultimately, like that was the impetus that got us to the Burger Bar. So we can get to that here, but so Hahana Beach exists. And then the Heritage Restaurant was across the street. And so my dad buys that restaurant and he buys that building. Cause he's like, look, the market has totally crashed. no one is ever going to buy this thing. We can buy it for next to nothing.
Yeah.
And we'll figure out something to do with it. And so we put a sign outside the front that said like, hey, for cool ideas, go to heritagecoolideas.com and tell us your idea.
As in like ideas for
like
what
whatever,
to do with it.
So like, I'll never
That's
forget,
great.
I'll never forget a guy who wanted to turn it into like, it was supposed to be sex fantasy land. Okay. So in the middle of Mariemont and Terrace Park,
Yeah.
he wants to build this business. It was amazing. It was, what he wanted to do was going to sell like sex toys and lingerie. And then he was going to book you like vacations. So you would be able to go in and like create your ultimate fantasy at this spot. And like, he's dead serious about pitching this thing. And I'm like, this is totally ludicrous. We had like a craft store that was going to be like during Easter, it's like Easterland. And during Thanksgiving, it becomes, you buy all these little tchotchkes or whatever.
Yeah. Which for people who don't know, who might not know, that sexual fantasy land, like Mariemont, Terrace Park, Indian Hill, like they're very conservative, laid back, old school for the most part. You know, it's changing a little bit now, but that's just never in a million years. It's somewhere where you go to raise your family, right? It's little kids all over the place. That's the last place would have like, a sexual fantasy land.
Even today, like kind of like, because people have just become more open to ideas.
Right.
But like, even today, I think that the school district would like throw a fit and they'd be like, look, our kids are not driving by this every day. Not okay. We're not letting this happen.
It is. It's right down the road from the high school.
Yes. Yeah. Just the community protects the kids. And that would be something that they're like, we're not really on board with this. So we had that. And then a few people had written in and said, hey, we should do a brewery. Like, hey, you should do a brewery. And it was like, okay, wait, like we actually do know how to do this restaurant piece. And I've watched these breweries popping up all over the country. Like this could work. And so one of the people that wrote in from the brewery standpoint was a kid, Whit Hesser, who grew up in Terrace Park. And so he was like, look, I'm looking to do a brewery. My brother-in-law is a brewer. We can figure out how to piece this thing together. And so I knew Whit, and we sat down and we went through like, here's how we're going to make this happen. This is how we're going to do it. And so we built the whole business model out, and we were like, here, these are all the things that are going to happen. And we opened 50 West. And one other thing, when you open a business, it's one of my favorite things. So when you name the business, it's one of the most nerve-wracking things when you have to tell someone the name of that business for the first time. Because the first few times you say it, like when I say 50 West now, it's just like, it is what it is.
It flows.
I know what it is.
Yep.
You know what it is.
Right.
Hopefully people out there listening know what it is. When you first say it, you're like, what's your business called? And you're like, 50 West. Is that good? Is 50 West? Is that good? Like you want their assurance that like,
would that work? Can you see that happening?
Yeah,
is
like,
that going to catch on?
Is that good? Should we done East? Should it be 50 East? Or like, should we not do the number thing?
Yeah.
And so it was so neat so we did 50 West, and the name came from, okay, that road that's out front of Route 50. It goes from Ocean City, Maryland to California. I used to take it to go to see my wife, or go to college. You could take it to go to Athens. You can take 32 or 50. When I get bored of taking 32, I take 50. My wife went to school in Harrisonburg, Virginia. I would sometimes just take 50 all the way there. I had no idea the road went all the way across the country. So I was working at Hahana Beach one night, and some guy on a Tuesday night at like 1 a.m. comes in on a motorcycle and like all decked out, and he wants a beer. I'm like, look, you're not from around here. I don't know who you are, but like, what's your story? And the guy's like, I'm on a motorcycle trip we're racing from California to the White House. He's like, my bike's broken down. I'm in last place. I'm just coming through here. I'm just having a beer until I get there. I'm like, but why are you here? And he's like, that road goes from Sacramento, California to Ocean City, Maryland. And the White House is literally on that road. I'm like, oh my God. Like I had no idea this road went all the way across the country. And so that's when that name came along. We started researching the history of the building that we went into, which was the Old Heritage. That was built in 1827. George Remus was a big bootlegger. He said his career was made getting alcohol in 50 and taking it west. And it was like, oh, 50 West. Like that's what we're going to call it. Like every beer we brew, we can think of as like a different road trip. And I had that whole background of living in hotels and driving the whole country in a Hummer. So like the road trip was just it was like, it was almost at the time we're like, is this good? Is this good? But when I look back on it, like 50 West it's me. Like it's all these things. It was the road that I took it to college. I took it to see my wife. The idea of road trips was just always been a part of my life. And so now it's one of those things looking back, it makes so much sense now. But at the time we were like, is this good?
Right. And that's amazing. those stories, or those pieces of the story where everything just kind of falls into place as you kind of take a step back and you look at it, like you said, as it's all coming together, you're kind of like questioning it. And now you look back and you're like, it's literally my life. And I think that's so important because when you look at a company, 50 West, and it embodies so much of not just, the business aspect and the fun, but who you are as a person, all these pieces growing up, taking 50 East, 50 West, going back and forth. And, it resembles your wife, it resembles your childhood. It's all this different stuff. I think that stuff is amazing. And it's probably so important and has probably helped in the sense of the passion that goes into creating the business.
I don't know. It's more just a weird thing. Like you reflect on it, you're like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense why that all happened. Yeah. But I don't know if it necessarily drives me day in and day out. Like, oh, but like when I look back and be like, oh my God, how did we get here? Like there's weird things that happen in your business. There's days you just like open your eyes and you're like, I can't believe all this happened. Like I can't believe this actually happened. But yeah. So we name it 50 West. We open up our doors and it's just like, we're just crushed. And our business plan was really poor. It was set up to basically open up a small brew pub. We thought we could scale into distribution and all this stuff. We were nowhere near, we didn't have the space. We didn't have any of that stuff. And so it led to, we were distributing beer and we were running out of beer and we were trying to figure this whole thing out. And then we got into how are we going to grow? And so my initial partners, it was myself, Whit, and Blake. So Blake was our brewer. Whit was his brother-in-law. And Whit was going to operate. So I had been operating restaurants and I went to him and was like, look, I can't do this. My wife's going to like leave me. You got to handle this piece. And Whit was like, I'll do it. I was like, I can help teach you. And then I was going to help do the distribution piece, which we didn't have enough beer to distribute. It like didn't make any sense. And so what ended up happening is, partnerships are really complicated. And so Whit and I were both really strong leaders, like really strong as far as from a leadership standpoint and wanting to take charge. And as we grew and dealt with these things, like we butted heads. It wasn't going to work out. And so Whit went and opened up another restaurant. And so when he did that, we were like, hey, you got to go focus on this. Blake and I are going to stick together and keep doing this aspect of it.
Was it pretty amicable? Was it pretty?
It was terrible.
Yeah.
It was hard. You know what it was? It was, I think we were both young and we were both really, it's just like, I'll never forget sitting down, like we had to sit down with like a lawyer and like go through this stuff. And, he said, he's like, you guys are both so filled with testosterone at this stage in your life. Like you're just young kids. And I think he's right. Like now that I'm getting older, I think as you get older, you chill out. Like, but at that point, it was like this struggle of just like, Whit, you need to go and we have to move forward and you're holding us back and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if that necessarily is 100% the case. Like looking at our business now, there's so many times where I look at our business and I'm like, dude, Whit would have been really great to have here. Like Whit would have been a really good person to have in this particular instance. But ultimately, I think partnerships, I tell people this all the time, it's harder than a marriage. So long story short, we ended up growing. So Blake and I take the brew pub, we take over what was Hahana Beach, we expand our distribution and we keep growing. And then, at that point in time, Blake and I came to we eventually, after a couple of years, came to a head and we're like, hey, look, this isn't going to work. Blake was at that point like, look, I don't want to keep working this way. Like he kind of looked at me and was like, you're a crazy person. And I don't want this. Like I'm doing it, but this is not what I wanted. I think in Blake's mind, he wanted that small brew pub and he wanted that like, hey, I'm putting my craft into this and we have the small brew pub that supports us and whatnot. And like, I just wanted the world. It was just like, hey, I just want to see how far we can take this. And so with Blake, it was a lot more amicable. We figured that out quicker. But I think ultimately, like, it probably just has to, I don't think I'm programmed well for partners. I think that, and I think you see it a lot. Like you'll see partnerships all the time dissolve. And I think it just has to do with, there's just so much opinion. You're leading people and you have to do all these things. And if you're not on the same page, then it doesn't work. And I think it's probably more of a flaw with me, than it was a flaw with them. If I really look at it, just like, I have such a drive and such a passion for getting where I want to go. And if someone gets in the way of that, I'm just like, hey, I got to do this. And so since it's just been me, at the top now, we've consistently had staff, like 50 West would be nowhere. It is not me. If you look at like where we've gotten, I'm way too flawed to get us where we've gotten to. There's so many support people that have helped out along the way. But I think the fact that I call the end all shots, I think that to me is something that like, it's just how I'm programmed as an individual.
Yeah. And as you look back, obviously the partnerships and the disagreements there are huge obstacles to overcome. What else did you face as you're growing 50 West? Because, you know, we look back, and again, as from a customer perspective, I just see the Heritage turn into 50 West, and then I see 50 West go across the street and it's no longer Hahana, and it's just growing. But as you're growing the business, what were some of the biggest difficulties aside from the partnership aspects, just in terms of growing 50 West to what it is today? I know.
That
list is probably huge.
No. A brewery's tough, right? Like we dealt with distribution, manufacturing, you know, running a restaurant, all the hardest things you could possibly pick.
Yeah.
So, and then just keeping your staff engaged, going through our partnership breakups while you have staff on. I mean, it's like watching your parents get divorced. I'm sure for them, they're like, whose side am I picking? Who's right? What's the right thing to do here?
Right.
So, and then just the challenges of the brewery landscape. When we started, there were 5 of us. There were people driving from all over the place down here to see what we were doing. And then, you know, your toy eventually doesn't get as shiny, right? Like all of a sudden what you were this new cool thing. And now somebody built something like 50 times better than yours. And now there's 75 of them and they're all around you. And I think you have to be in our business, you constantly have to be reinventing yourself and being better all the time. The minute they always say like, you're either growing or you're dying. Like, that's 100% true.
Right.
So for our business, like, you know, we had reached a point, like the brew pub was like up till last year, like it was dying. Like we were sitting there going, oh my God, what are we going to do? And that's sort of where the burger bar concept came into play. Like what I saw on the burger bar was I took all the things I knew about Hahana Beach and I looked at everyone that was going to breweries, and everyone that was going to breweries were really the people that it wasn't. Breweries are so misunderstood because you think that it's about millennials, right? Oh, it's millennials going and drinking. It's not in any way. To be honest, like our core customer is more like the adult that created a child. They're now a parent. And because they have this human that they have to bring with them, they're like, oh, I can bring them to the brewery and they can go wherever they want. I get to drink. They're kind of happy because they don't have to sit at a table where they're not allowed to move.
Yeah.
And so we saw that like when we opened up Production Works, it was like the saddest thing because here we had this tap room with all these people coming through and they'd bring their kids and their kids are like digging in this small section of sand they're like allowed to be in because there's volleyball happening around them. And so the thought process with the burger bar was like, look, let's do it. Like, let's make this about the kids. Forget the parents. They're going to come here and drink beer regardless, but let's make the kids love it more than the parents do. Because as a parent, if my kids love something and I get to go there and drink beer and like, I love that too. Like now it's like a super win.
Best of both worlds. Yeah.
And so we looked at that and said, how do we create this playland that caters to the kids? And so that was the burger bar. And the burger bar was like, you know, we'd planned this thing, we'd built it all out, and then COVID hits in the middle of it. And that was the lowest point for me, like professionally, was probably like March. Actually, I was out on a date with my wife, and they canceled the NBA season. My wife and I don't go on many dates, and we went out on a date, and the whole COVID thing's happening, and it's like, what is this? What's this thing that we're dealing with? And while we're sitting there, I can't remember if I looked at my phone on ESPN.com and it said they canceled the NBA season. I knew what that meant right there. I knew it because to me, our business was always like, most bars are like this, like get to March Madness and then opening day and then summer hits and then things are good and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I was like, if the NBA got canceled, there's no way they're playing college basketball. And if college basketball gets canceled, they're probably not going to. And then I was like, we're screwed. Like we're real screwed. And then the governor like shut everything down. And we had a layoff. I think we had close to 70 employees at the time. And I had to lay them off. I sent a video message out crying, just like.
How many did you have to lay off?
We were down to 11 employees.
Wow.
So we were lucky to have the manufacturing to be able to go into grocery stores and stuff, but that was it.
Yeah.
The brew pub was not set up to service people. Like, I was like, oh, do to-go food. I'm like, the people who are coming here weren't coming for food. They were coming to eat. They're coming to drink beers and like we had food, right?
Yeah.
So like
exactly
getting them to come here, we're not set up. We've never really done to-go well. So I went into like a mental state, essentially. I couldn't sleep. I was just like writing. I did a lot of writing. And eventually I had like a full like mental break where I was like, what am I supposed to do? And it ended up being awesome. So what happens is we're in the midst of trying to open the burger bar. Like we're in construction. We're trying to do construction. We don't know if we can do construction. And then the other point of this is like, if we do construction, what are we doing it for? Because we can't even open up the space.
Yeah.
And so we eventually, like, I'm watching our revenues decline every single day. And I would just walk through and it was like the Grim Reaper. Like I would pull in somebody into a room and like, if I wanted to ask them like a question, they were like, oh my God, I'm getting fired. I'm getting fired. And 60% of the time they were getting
Rightfully
fired.
so, yeah.
So every day I'd look at our revenue and then I go in and I'm like, all right, this guy's next, this guy's next. And I would explain to our staff is like, we're on a boat and like we have to get to land. Okay. So boat, land. The problem with COVID was I didn't know how far away land was. So all I needed to do was keep the boat afloat, but the more people on the boat, the faster it's going to sink.
Yep.
And all that really matters was that the boat got to land. Because if the boat sinks, then we all die. But if I can get the boat, even if it's just me land on the boat, float into land, I would tell them like, look, once it hits land, just start swimming. Because we're back. You guys, you might not be able to take the boat there, but like you can swim over there and rejoin us. And so we would have meetings every morning and I would tell them that. And it's funny looking back on it because our staff will be like, I mean, you would just walk in there and tell us every day, like, hey, you're going to be fired eventually. They're like, that was the worst message you could have been giving us. Like, here we are watching like the world collapse around us. And every day we're coming into a meeting of you being like, look, tomorrow's not guaranteed for you. Like, I'm going to do what I can, but there's no promises here, guys.
Yeah.
So like, we wanted you to just fire us so we didn't have to come into this. Like, so what we did was we would just clean. So we cleaned and we cleaned and we cleaned. Our manufacturing staff continued to manufacture. We laid off most of our sales staff except for Max, who Max has been with me since the beginning of this company. He's an amazing kid. And so what ends up happening is like, I'm down to having to let go of my management team from the restaurant because there's nothing left for them to clean. And I just was like, for whatever reason, I was like, I saw that you could do to-go business somewhere. Like, hey, I'm sorry. I saw you could do delivery. I didn't think you could do delivery for some reason. I was like, oh, you can deliver. So I got this insane thought in my head that we were going to fake open up the burger bar and we were going to run like delivery out of a kitchen that wasn't even permitted, right? So I rally my team in that morning. There was like 11 of us left. Keep in mind, most of them are in manufacturing. And I'm like, here's the deal. I was like, I'm tired of laying people off. I was like, we've got one shot at making this work. I was like, these 4 people right here, if you guys don't want to do this and you think I'm crazy, we're fine. They're losing their jobs. So like we're either doing what I'm saying and we're going to make this happen, or these 4 people lose their jobs. And so I'm like, here, we're all going to work 7 days a week. All job titles are gone. I don't care if you're a salesperson, if you work in the brewery, you help open this burger bar. Like, we're going to figure this out. I was like, if you guys are on board with it and you don't think I'm a lunatic, like, let's do it. And they were all like, let's go. And so we started and we just started working on this space. So I then would call my vendors and I would be like, here's the deal. I was like, the world is shutting down around us. If you don't get this task done for me, 4 people lose their job. And every single time they would be like, okay, so I need the outside. Yeah. I was like, I need the outside of the building painted. And the guy's like, I don't know if I can do it. But I'm like, okay, if you don't do this for me, I'm laying 4 people off today. Because if that building doesn't get painted, I can't open my space. We can't make this work. So you either figure out how to make that happen, or that's, and it got so bad that I walked into a Dairy Queen. We were trying to get the ice cream machine to work, and we needed to have this ice cream solution that goes into the machine that we have. And my vendors couldn't get it to me because you couldn't get anything in COVID. And they're like, we can't get it to you. And so I walked into Dairy Queen and I'm like, look, I need to buy your bulk ice cream bag. And there's like this 15-year-old girl working the counter by herself. And I'm like, if you do not give me this ice cream bag, 4 people lose their jobs right now. And the girl's like, she's like on the verge of tears. She's like,
right,
I think I have to call my manager. So she calls the manager, and the manager's like, wait, what's going on? She's like, there's some guy here that's telling me if I don't sell him this ice cream bag, like, he's going to fire 4 people. And so the guy's like, I got to call the owner. I'm pretty sure the owner at that point was like, call the police right now.
Yeah, you can imagine.
There's a psychopath trying to like willingly buy Dairy Queen ice cream, but I had just had so much success using that tactic that I'd also lost. Like at this point, it was like fight or flight. So
exactly,
we ended up running into an issue with our building department where the building department guy wasn't going to pass us. Like here we are, we've done all of this. I'm trying to keep people employed. And the Hamilton County building department guy is going out of his way to not let us pass. And I had to get removed because I was like ready to call. I was ready to go to jail. Like I was like, I'm going to go to jail before I give these people's jobs up. We have worked way too hard at this. So we end up getting somebody else. Like we get another inspector to come out at the space. And the guy's like, absolutely pass. I really apologize.
Can you explain that a little bit? What were they not going to let you pass?
So if you go through building inspections, they can find anything they want to not let you open. Okay.
Right.
Keep in mind, I'm trying to open like a half-ass. What I'm arguing at the time is like, look, we're not even opening the inside of the space. All I need you to do is allow people to come in and work inside this kitchen because I want to set tents up on the outside to sell them food. So it was in the history of building departments, I don't know if anyone has ever proposed, let me open, but not let people inside my space. So the guy was just like, I don't know how to respond. And different people have different attitudes.
Right.
And to me, it was like, I was fighting to keep people's jobs alive. And to him, like he was just, I think, frustrated with the state that he was in, right?
Everything
like everybody
on.
was frustrated with everything that was going on.
Exactly.
So luckily there was another inspector that I knew, and I somehow he got assigned to us that day and came in and was like, basically was like, yep, you guys are good. You pass. And he's like, Bobby, I need you to make sure these things happen, but I'm going to pass you. And he passed us. And it was like, so then it was like, oh my God, like we did it. Now the only thing was like, is anybody actually going to order food? Right. Like so I told my team when we started, we had to do $20,000 a day. That was it. It was like, we have to do $20,000. I'm sorry, $20,000 for the week was the number. $20,000 for the week.
And just selling burgers and
to-go burgers, beer, French fries, milkshakes.
Yeah, milkshakes.
Okay.
Right.
The brew pub was doing like, we were on our demise and we were only doing like $33,000 a week. Okay. That was at a full service restaurant. So now we're going to open this thing up, not let anybody inside. And we have to do $20,000 a week. And I'll never forget. So Max helped me build this company. He started as a host at the host stand, was a brewer for us, was sales. He oversees all of our strategy. So after we go through this like really emotional speech and we get everybody fired up, he's like, Bobby, like, can we do $20,000 a week? And I was like, honestly, I'm not really sure, but like, this is it. Like if we don't do $20,000 a week, we can then just like sit here and fire everybody and just wait till business comes back, or we can fight and try to make it work.
Right. We literally don't have a choice.
We don't have a choice. I don't have a choice. I'm not sleeping at night. What I've done so far is basically be like, hey, we're just going to clean and wait till the world comes back. And then at a certain point, I was just like, look, this world's not coming back. Like it's not coming back. Like this is a new world. Either you adapt and you figure out how to make it work, or you're going to die. And so I literally went into just like fight or flight. And it was like, we're going to work, we're going to figure this out. And our whole team did it. Everybody was like, it became this deal where like going home, like you didn't go home because you felt like you were letting the team down. It was like tribal type stuff.
Yeah.
So the first thing we do is I called the township up and I'm like, look, I need help. I was like, we're about to fold. I was like, here's what I want you to do. I'm like, if you guys can figure out any funds, I'm like, how about you buy dinner for everybody up in the neighborhood right above us, and they'll come down and we'll get to test our program. And so they agreed to it. Like, okay.
They did.
They did it. They did. I mean, it was like I think it was like $3,000 or something.
Yeah.
They got funds and they were giving them to different restaurants. So we ended up doing a drive-through. It was our first thing. The drive-through took, I think people waited 2 hours to get food. The line went all the way down to the end of the block. 2 hours. Imagine going to like Wendy's and it takes you 2 hours to get your food. Okay. This is their first experience, but it's during COVID and nobody cares. They're all like just excited to be out of their house.
That is exactly what I was going to say. And that neighborhood that you talked about, one of my friends lives up there, and he sent a message to our entire group telling us how excited he was, how great the burgers were. And from this perspective, right, of the consumer who is probably working from home, who has literally nothing else going on. There's no movies to go to, nothing exciting really happening. In a neighborhood like Mariemont, that news that 50 West is now going to do burgers and that you can go out to your house and drive through and,
Yes.
see people for the first time in months, literally months.
Yes.
It worked, and it worked. So I don't have to tell you, but just for anybody listening, it worked so well. And it really did, kind of incite this sort of excitement in the community that, maybe things aren't so grim, and it seems so simple, but it was major at the time.
So the drive-through for us did, like, that concept we couldn't get the food out fast enough to make it work. So also, like, while we set our tent up on the outside, and like a minute within the tent being, it blew across Wooster Pike and got destroyed. So we like go get another, like, oh God. But so what that taught us was like, okay, we can't do drive-through. But for the first time in the history of the service industry that I've worked in, or probably most people have ever worked, that's the first time I've ever given customers terrible customer service. And they were like, this is great.
Thank you. Yeah,
like, thank you. So we got to stumble through that. Like, had this not been COVID, everyone would have been like, that place sucks. I waited an hour and a half to get a cheeseburger. And like, they got my order wrong after it was over. So the next thing we did was like, all right, well, that's not going to work. Well, what can we do? And so one of the coolest parts about what we did, my uncle owns a gas station around the corner. Our point of sale system could not work. The one that we had, we wanted to get another system that had an online order, but they couldn't get us the stuff. They had a random one. It had 2 mobile handhelds and 1 computer screen. We stole it from the gas station next door, and we literally like built our own network of online, all this stuff on 2 mobile. Keep right now inside our space. I think we're operating off of, I want to say there's 11 computers inside of there. Like, we have 11 computers. We have multiple handhelds. We have this massive system. We took 2 like little mobile handhelds that we stole from the gas station. We stuck the one set computer and stuck it in the kitchen as like, that was like our button we would hit when the food would be ready. So we then opened up online ordering. And when we opened it up, we put a tent outside. Keep in mind, the cashier is my vice president of strategy and my graphic designer, who just hasn't been fired yet because he was next on the list, like probably to go. But like, we're like, hey, at this point, we just like, you're willing to help. You want to make ranch dressing, you do whatever it would take. So they're operating as like our cashiers and doing this stuff. Well, these are really smart people that are doing this for us. And so by having them up there, they were able to recognize all of the like, okay, this can be better, that can be better. And they're thinking at like a different level. And so we opened up online orders. And now our biggest issue is there's too many orders. So now the food is taking forever, because with online orders, we would do like a scheduled order and there'd be like 100 people would want to get food at 6:30. You can't get 100 orders out at one time.
At the same time, yeah.
So now we're looking at like, okay, what do we do? So then we figured out that we could do 2 orders every minute. And so we had a person that would watch the computer. And then every time it would get past more than 20 orders in a 10-minute segment, we would bump it out to give the kitchen time. Keep in mind, I'm working on the kitchen line. Like, I'm literally in the kitchen. I haven't done this in probably, 10 years. So much fun. Here I am back to like the absolute root of all this time that I was running 50 West. It was like, oh, we have a kitchen, we have all this stuff. And like, I'm not involved in that part. I was involved in all these other things, but I'm not in the heat of it.
Right.
Now I'm literally on that line.
You're back, boots on the ground.
Feeling the pressure. and it's like all of us are like, went back to our most like rare core form. And so now we're trying to deal with too many orders. Well, we then figured that out. We figured out the order thing. And now all of a sudden, like, it all leads up to this Friday. That's just like, it's gangbusters. We get our butts kicked and everybody's exhausted. We've been doing this for a week and we're like, oh, I can't believe this is happening. And our staff is like, just ready to quit. And I gave them this speech. I told them, I said, look, that was the AFC Championship game we just played. I was like, tomorrow's the Super Bowl. I was like, we can sit here and celebrate this and talk about how great it is. I'm like, but we all know that Saturday night's gonna be bigger than Friday night. And I was like, if we celebrate right now, we're just gonna get killed tomorrow and nobody wants that. And I was like, let's get back to work. And it was like the most like unhappy, just like, we're doing this because I guess we have to. And so that Saturday hit. And when we opened our doors at 11. By open our doors, it was just a 10 outside. And it is just ticket after ticket, nonstop from 11 a.m. until we closed our doors at 9. I mean, it was just, I'm on that line and I have tears like flowing. I'm literally crying while I'm making people's burgers because I can't believe this is really happening. Like, here we were like, how are we going to be able to survive? What do we do? To all of a sudden, it's like the most busy restaurant that I've ever seen and customers aren't allowed in the door. And it's insane. And so when I closed the tab at the end of that day, with the day's over and everybody's looking at each other. I mean, it was like, I'm not like super religious or anything, but like, it was like Jesus walked through the door. Everybody was just like, what in the world is this? And, I printed the ticket at the end of the day, and we had done in a single day, we had done $21,000 in one day. It was the busiest day I've ever seen, ever in my life, on to-go cheeseburgers.
Which was your goal for the whole week, which you didn't even think you could hit.
I pulled our staff in. I mean, I brought them all to the middle, and I was just like, guys, this is the highlight of my career. I was like, we've had an amazing run here. I'm like, I went from telling my wife we were going to sell our house, from like not being able to sleep, looking at my kids and being like, oh my God, what are we going to make of our life? You know, thinking I was going to have to let people go, to all of a sudden, like all we did was just not give up and think creatively and work really, 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 really hard. And this is what happens. And,
right.
And watching it, like, if you knew how much work went into not just that week or 2 weeks, but we'd been working on this for months to get this burger bar running. And our staff was just like, so I brought them all in and I told him, I said, look, so at about 8:30, my dad's there and he's just like watching this, like, oh, I can't believe this is happening. And he's like, hey, is there anything I can do? And I'm like, go to Kroger right now. He's like, buy them out of all the champagne you can get your hands on. And so I brought them all into the middle and I said to him, I said, guys, I said, look, I said, yesterday was the AFC championship game. I said, I told you we couldn't celebrate. I was like, today was Super Bowl. I was like, we just won the Super Bowl. I was like, when you win the Super Bowl, you celebrate.
Then you celebrate. No kidding.
And we broke out all the bottles of champagne and we went out into that grass area that everybody knows now. At the time, you weren't allowed back there, but we went out there and we sprayed champagne all over each other. And I have this incredible picture. It's the backdrop of my laptop. What I want for Christmas this year is I want this picture blown up, like massive. It is the proudest photo. You look at it and it's our team. It was what was left of our team. People that had worked so freaking hard celebrating this like amazing accomplishment. And the best part in all of it. So one of our things, we source our buns for the burger bar. It's like a really important piece of the business. And so we had actually sold out of buns so that we couldn't open the next day. So everybody got the day off finally after week after week. We couldn't open because we couldn't get buns in. And it was honestly like, guys, we
huge relief.
We just did what we thought we needed. We thought maybe we could do this in a week. We just did it in one day. And then after that, it just was like, I mean, it was so fun. So then the governor, so then what ends up happening is people start coming and eating in our parking lot. And one of the coolest things while this whole thing was going on was we had made all this beer that was supposed to go to the Reds, but the Reds weren't playing. And this beer was like made specifically for them. So whenever people would have bad experiences, we would just be like, just give them the beer. Just like, this is not legal. We know it's not legal. But at this point in time, this is the Wild West.
Nothing is off the table.
So
exactly.
People would come in and be like, my food's messed up. It's 40 minutes late. We'd just say, just give them free beer. So people would be, it's during COVID. They're all in our parking lot, just like throwing back beers. Like, my food's taking 45 minutes, but you know,
I don't even care.
I don't even care. I haven't been around people and now I'm drinking beer and it's kind of weird, but I guess it's okay.
Yeah.
So then people started having like birthday parties in our parking lot. So I have this great photo of all these women. They got to be like 60, 70 years old. And they're all sitting in our parking lot with chairs around having a birthday party, eating our food. So then the governor allows us to open up the back and we built this incredibly beautiful space and people are setting up. So now I'm walking out of the parking lot being like, hey, you can't really, no, we came here. Don't tell us we can't. I'm like, no. Just, if you wouldn't mind just walking back over here, I think you're going to like it. And then they'd walk back and like, oh yeah, this is really nice.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I have to say, even just, from watching it unfold myself, literally from start to finish, not even being aware of exactly what's going on, but your navigation, 50 West in general, the navigation of COVID and all of these completely unprecedented times, it's brand new territory for everybody.
Yeah.
But for a business who's so impacted by something like a lockdown, right? You can't go and you can't be social. To see the way that you guys and girls navigated this business and, these challenges was amazing. And maybe I'm just not exposed to a bunch of different businesses, but I think it's hands down the most successful I've seen in terms of the navigation. But
a lot of it's also other pieces of this that are crazy. We couldn't play volleyball, right?
Right.
So traditionally we do volleyball leagues. So we couldn't do that. So we had to take the nets down and we're like, well, what are we going to do? We're like, let's just put the tables in the sand. It gives us more space, makes people, well, then we found out that like people really like that. They like to sit in the sand. So then it became like, well, are we going to do the volleyball leagues? Because this has become like a thing. So we ended up figuring out how to do it. But there's just, it's so funny. People would walk in. So like the crosswalk came in and the bike trail, I had worked 10 years trying to get that done. And it all just coincidentally was all happening at the same time that my life was falling apart. And then all of a sudden we pulled it together and people were like, whoa, how did you get a crosswalk built? And you're like, well, I've actually been working on this for like 10 years. This wasn't part of like a COVID plan, but it all just kind of fell into place.
Yeah.
But it took me to my absolute lowest moment. Like it took me to like, I think one of the coolest things was my career was over. Okay. I'd come to that conclusion that like everything that I had built, it was going to be gone. And I was going to tell my wife this, I had to look at my wife and be like, hey, you said for richer, for poor, like, do you really mean this? Right. Like that was, and I think once I was at that lowest moment, it really wasn't that, it was actually kind of fun.
It's almost liberating in a sense.
It was liberating. Yeah. I've seen it. Like
yep.
you always think about that of like, oh God, what if this happens? What if that happens? But when you actually see your lowest moment, and what was really shined through to me was like the support. All these friends of mine just like showing up and trying, and I hated that. I hated, when we were in the midst of, we couldn't get this home, they'd walk and they'd be buying cases of beer and it was like pity sales. And I'm like, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
But man, when you see people come out and support you and whatnot, and then you also, for me, that's like fighting. Like I'm a fighter. Like that's how I'm programmed. I'm at my best when I need to fight to make something happen. And COVID was like, gave me that opportunity to fight. And it made me so mad at myself in other aspects of just like, there were so many times that I didn't make hard decisions because I didn't have to fight for it. Right. And when I got to the COVID point where I was like, I have no other choice but to do this. It was the best that I'd been in God knows how long. So
yeah. Yeah.
So,
and we could see it from a customer perspective. But I'm curious, when you think about such a challenging time and, your back is literally against the wall.
Yeah.
You're from a business perspective, you're almost at rock bottom. And then you think about the way that, your dad had treated you when you came over to take over the Heritage.
Yeah.
Or Slat's Pub.
Yeah.
That attitude where it's like no bad job or
there's never been, I've had so many bad decisions. The guy's never, I want him so many times. I want him to come in and be like, no, that's so, the amount of times I go to him and I tell him like, this is a terrible idea. What are we doing? He just like, that's just, I don't know. There's no fear in getting yelled at. Like there's no, I mean, he's yelled at me, but it's never, he yells at me because the dumpster in the trash can's overflowing. It's like weird. It's never like, hey, did you think about this? Financials are messed up here. It's never anything to do with that. It's always just been like, hey, the sky's the limit. Like we can do whatever we want.
Right.
So yeah, it was neat to, our family was, my sister walked in and saw the whole thing, just started crying. She was just like, I can't believe this is happening. And yeah, I think it was that ingrainment of hard work. If you work really hard, you can make anything happen. That was the epitome of, if you work really hard, you can make anything. Keep in mind, while I'm doing this, my wife, I have 3 kids at home. She took everything. She literally took the family and was like, I get it. I know what you have to do. I got this. She works for Deloitte. She works for a big company. Yeah. She has a really great job.
Right.
She took care of our whole family, took care of her job. And I disappeared for like 3 months and she just let me go. She just let me do that. So I think it's easy to look at it and see the exciting side from my side. And then you got to look at it and be like, hey, there were a lot of sacrifices that she made to help make that happen.
And it's interesting to look at it that way. Cause now I'm just thinking back to, your childhood, your parents split up and your dad is always out on, working on these different ventures and you needed that stepmom who was the rock. And now it's coming to fruition. It's manifesting. That same message is kind of manifesting itself in your own life.
You see, and like, if you look at my dad, that's like why him and my mom got divorced. I mean, I don't know the whole intricacies of it, but they a big part of it though was like my dad was just so driven, wanting to do what he wanted to do, and my mom was like, he wasn't a support figure for it, right? Like his idea of supporting was to create success and create that support there, and my mom was a driven woman that wanted to have her own successes, and the two of them, they weren't on the same page, and so that led to for my dad. His whole life was really driven towards success. He was an incredible father, like incredible, always so supportive, always hit you with the right messages. But as far as the day-to-day stuff, like he relied on my mom and my stepmom to keep that in check for us.
Right.
And yeah, it is neat to see that. But yeah, with my wife, like, for those of you out there that are married, I think that's one of the hardest parts. Like, as a young entrepreneur, man, accomplish as much as you can before you get married. Marriage is that's a really challenging thing. And you got to be really fortunate to have, be in a relationship that understands, like, for my wife to understand that and to be able to let me do it. She just knew, she knew that's what needed to happen. And I don't know. I think that I was really proud to be able to come back and be able to say, like, hey, look, remember when I said we were going to sell the house? We have to do that. Like, you let me do this. Like, we're going to be okay.
Right.
We got this.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So yeah. It's cool.
Absolutely. It's just such a great story. And I have a couple other questions here as we wrap it up. And the first one is just, what's next? Obviously, you've gone through all these troubles with COVID, but you've had serious success and you're still having success. I mean, I came up here from your volleyball league, had some of your burgers for dinner, had the pumpkin spice milkshake. The whole nine yards.
Thank you.
What's next on your agenda as you look in the near future? What do you have for 50 West? What's planned for 50 West going forward?
So with a burger bar, this is all COVID. This is everything I learned. So people would be like, oh, well, what are you gonna do in the winter? It'd make me so mad. I would get I had a friend ask me that. I just blew up on him.
I'm glad I didn't ask you that.
No. I'm good now. But he asked me that, and we're having all this success and things are good, and we hired all these people back, and I really take a lot of pride in being able to I love leading people. My mom, I wrote a lot during this when I was having a full mental breakdown, and as we're going through all this stuff, and my mom said, she goes, I sent it to my mom. My mom's a therapist, so I like send her weird stuff like that. Like, hey mom, just read my feelings.
Naturally,
right? Like that's so she's like, well, what do you think is important to you? And I was like, I think that what's important to me is that I figure out a way to succeed no matter what, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, that's not what I'm reading. She's like, what's important to you is that you value your people and you want to take care of your people. And she's like, I think that's why you're struggling so hard with this, is that for me, the fact that there was an outside force that was affecting that I couldn't figure out how to fix it. And it was making me, I can't take care of my people anymore. It drove me crazy. So I'm sitting at dinner with some friends and one of them says like, oh, hey, Burger Bar's going great, but like, what are you gonna do in the winter? And I was like, I snapped. I was like, I'm gonna lay off most of our staff. And we're gonna knock it down to a really to-go format, and we'll be really profitable, and business will be good. But they're gonna have to figure out what to do with their life. And I just, like, it was a really nasty answer the way that I responded to him, because it made me angry because I didn't know the answer. And the way that I view it is like, I want to figure out how to take care of these people. So I was like, what in the world could we do to take care of them? And we've always talked about doing an ice skating rink, and so we were like, we're doing it. Like, if there's ever a year to do an ice skating rink, this is the year.
No kidding.
So it's super expensive. Like, ice skating rink, it's going to cost, we're going to invest like over $100,000 to put a stupid ice skating rink out there.
Holy cow.
But the way that I view it is, it gives my people a chance. It shows that we're fighting, right? And that's what COVID taught me. It was like, you don't give up. You don't take the route of like, well, we'll just wait till things get better. It's like, hey, if you fight and you work hard, like, people will embrace that and they will come out during these times. And so so the rink for us was like, all right, let's turn, what do other businesses do? What does Kings Island do? What did the beach water park do? What did the zoo do? And we're like, hey, we got to turn this place into winter wonderland. If we do that, then we can keep our people working. They can keep money coming into there. They don't have to go worry for themselves about whether they're going to find another job or whether the government's going to support them on some unemployment package that may or may not be there. And so, so we decided we're going to do that. So that ice skating rink goes in next week. We're knocking out a big window in the front of the building right now. So we're going to set up a more conducive to-go window. But we're like in the process of trying to do this all on the fly. We're putting heaters up, all the things you don't think about. Okay, great. We got an ice skating rink. Well, now our bartenders are going to freeze. We got to keep the bartenders warm. How do we do that? We got to put up gas. So we're getting all that stuff done to protect our staff here. And I couldn't be more excited about it, because it's like, if we fail, who cares?
Yeah.
The way I look at it is like, we had a really successful summer, and if we fail, then we learned that this doesn't work. But if we succeed, then we can know, then great. And whether we fail or we succeed, I hope that my staff looks at what we're doing and say, we literally did everything we possibly could to keep this thing going. So I just knowing that we're trying, I hope that I hope that the staff feels like they work for a company that wants to take care of them, because that's the intent with everything that we're doing here. So that's what's going on in Cincinnati. We'll have the ice rink up November 1st, supposed to be installed by the 5th. And then we've got like some tents going up. We don't know if people are going to want to be in tents. We're buying like a giant bonfire pit. We're going to do bonfires on the weekend. Like we're trying to turn this into just like a crazy, like if you want to be outside, there's a way for you to be outside.
Right. It sounds good to me. Yeah. I think I definitely will be making an appearance or two.
So we've got that going on that front. And then in the midst of all this, we were opening up a brewery in Chillicothe, Ohio. So 50 goes all the way across the country. So prior to this, we're like with 50 West, and we're kind of just in this standstill of like, okay, we've got Cincinnati distribution. There's breweries popping up everywhere. What can we do? And we've always liked this idea of like having these little breweries along Route 50. So we looked at Chillicothe, and they had 20,000 people. They didn't have a brewery in their town. It was on Route 50, and it was like, oh my God, like this would be so much fun to do this. And so we started working on this about like, I don't know, 2 years ago. And we're about 3 weeks away from that opening. So we're on this roller coaster right now of, we got to get the ice skating rink and all that operational. And then we're going to be opening up in this town. So I literally just got back from Chillicothe prior to this interview,
right?
Getting some stuff approved, but to see the excitement in that town. So we're in the middle of this downtown, and that Chillicothe, Ohio, if you're listening and you're in Chillicothe right now, you know what I'm talking about. When we first went in there, their downtown was just starting to come back to life. This is a downtown that had been, Chillicothe was our first and third capital of Ohio. It was a thriving little metropolis at one point in time, and their downtown had wore out its welcome, but there's beautiful buildings. And so we saw a couple restaurants go in there, and then a couple more shops. And then we have this awesome hub right on 50, which is Main Street in Chillicothe. And so we have this awesome building going there. And it's kind of getting back to what we did when we opened 50 West here in Cincinnati. Like when we opened here, we were this new thing that nobody had seen before, and it was so exciting.
Right.
And we're getting to go through that one more time.
Yeah.
So that's going to open. Hopefully our plan is once we get occupancy, which literally could be tomorrow, 4 weeks from the day we have occupancy, we're going to open up. We have a brewer, Jenny from MacArthur. She's going to be our brewer out there. So we kind of have to go and get all those things up to speed, but we got a lot going on right now.
That is a lot going on, and all falling into place at once.
All falling into place at once, and it's scary. It's like this is the roller coaster phase, right? So
right.
you're going up that hill, and you're going, oh my God, is the ice rink going to fail? Oh my God. Do we have any idea what we're doing in Chillicothe? Like, what if, I know these people are excited, but what if this isn't what they want? So you're having all those thoughts. And then there's the other thoughts of it, of like, I just got to tell my team, like, hey guys, it's about to be on again. Like we've kind of gotten into the comfort zone over at the burger bar where it's like, you open every day and it kind of just works.
Yeah.
I get to go back to them like, all right, rip your shirt off, put your war paint on. Like it's like Lord of the Flies. We're just like, we gotta figure this
Time to
out.
take another leap. Yeah.
So we're in the process of organizing that right now. And the downside is when COVID happened, it was like, look, we have to do this to survive if we don't do this. Now, I think there'll be, without having that survival, it gets a little bit more complicated because I think people's opinions can be, when you're in survival mode, it's just like, look, either we do it or we die.
Nobody asks why in survival mode.
No, there's no why. It's just like, okay, our graphic designer, Alex, said this, and it's one of my favorite, like we were sitting there and he basically was like, the conversation came up whether I was senile or sane or whatever. And Alex was like, look, at this point, I don't have any choice. I just have to do whatever you say we're going to do. I don't know which one of these is right, but unfortunately, like this is the boat that I've lashed myself to. So it is what it is.
Right.
So with going into this space, it's a little bit of a different circumstance. And so there'll be difference of opinions, which almost is to your disadvantage. It's like having that, it was so nice with COVID because it was just like, look, we either do it or we die, or, now there's going to be a lot more opinions and a lot more things that go into it. So that's going to be complex to navigate because everybody kind of has their own ideas of things, but I know as a group we'll figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and after this show, I have no doubt that you will.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's great. The final question that I have, just to kind of wrap things up here, is as you have reflected, just tonight, or I'm sure you do it a lot, but on this journey, it's been crazy. There's been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of surprises along the way. As you kind of think back to maybe, your 10-year-old self, and you're at that point in time, you have absolutely no idea what kind of journey you're about to embark on
Yeah.
for the rest of your life. And, you know, you have no idea the trials and tribulations and the successes and the joys. If you could give that version of yourself a piece of advice for embarking on that crazy journey, now that you know what you know, what would it be?
Oh, that's tough. I do think about my 10-year-old self a lot. And I think like, there's days where I like open my eyes and I'm like, I literally like, this is all, most of it has to do with my wife. Most of it is like, I'm so proud that I married my wife. Like I look back at 10-year-old me and I'm like, if I could go to that kid and be like, hey, you were going to marry Becca Coith one day. Like that would be like, at that point in life, I'd be like, okay, well, this is great. I don't have to worry about anything because I got all that I wanted.
Yeah.
So, and I'm also so grateful for the life that I have. I think that, hard work plays a huge role in it. Like, just don't give up. Don't give up. Work hard. That good things will happen to you. Be good to people. I would tell my 10-year-old self, take school a lot more seriously. Like, yes, when you grow up, you are going to have a life that you probably didn't even imagine that you ever could have had. But even with that being said, oh, you screwed up so much by not just studying. Like, you closed doors that didn't need to be closed. You're going to spend time on Google that you didn't need to probably look stuff up because you would have learned it earlier on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for anybody that wants to be an entrepreneur, it's an incredible journey. It's hard. There's a lot. You need to be, the people that you surround yourself with need to understand you. Like, there are sacrifices that have to be made. There are definitive sacrifices. Like, for me to have the wife that I have and the support system that she provides, like, I don't have a lot of really close friends. I have friends, but there's not a lot of people I let in my circle, partially because my circle is just so messed up. And to have that like rock person that just like is there, that has allowed for all of these things. Like,
Yeah.
I'm really fortunate to have that. But yeah, work hard. I think most entrepreneurs will tell you that.
Right.
And I think also, you get to talk about my dad. Like, don't limit your dreams. Just like what if it's easy to say, right? Like, you're going to make sacrifices to go after those things. But the way that I was raised and the way that the messaging that he gave me, like, I get mad about it because I'm always like, yeah, you should have said go this way, right? Like, could I have made more money doing something else? Probably. Would I be able to look at all these cool things that have happened? I feel like there's like a story, right? Like, my life has been like a pretty crazy story.
An amazing story, if I may say so myself.
Yeah,
and it's the reason we're here today. And I honestly had no idea how incredible the backstory or the journey really was. And I've enjoyed every moment of this. And I know that the people listening will too.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's the fun part about being an entrepreneur, right? Like, I think what most people assume when they look at your business, like, oh, you must have so much money and you have this and that. And like, I don't really think that's true. It seems like my experience for being an entrepreneur is every time you make money, you just have to keep putting it back in, because the more you want, the more you have to just keep betting on yourself. Yep. But the people and just watching it all come together, it's very rewarding. I'm very happy with the life that I have. I don't really have, if I look at my life, I don't really have any real regrets outside of the school thing that we keep touching on. It's like, hey, educate yourself, take advantage of those opportunities, especially if you're a kid out there that has those, understand and appreciate those. That's not everyone is as lucky to be given. When I say opportunity, not necessarily, I'm not talking about a nice car or a nice house. I'm talking about just being in an environment that can allow you to thrive through education. Because if you thrive with education, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want.
Right.
Literally whatever you want. You want to be a neuroscientist, you can be a neuroscientist if you want to. You want to go study snakes in South America, you can go study snakes in South America. Like, all those opportunities are there for you. And that was the one piece that I think I would have missed on, but the rest of it's been awesome.
Yeah, 100%. And there's so many lessons packed into this story and into your journey that I don't even know where to begin. And I'm thinking now about, writing my intro for this episode, and I'm just, my mind's going a million miles an hour and I don't know where to start. And I'm just thinking about the fact that it's all about the journey, not the destination, how important relationships are and being able to create them and maintain them and, educate.
Take small snippets. I always say one of the things I wish I would have done was worked at McDonald's. I'm always like, oh, I can't, because there's so many snippets of life. So like you work at McDonald's as a kid, you're probably just like, oh, it sucks, I work at McDonald's or whatever. But like freaking the smartest people ever created that. And you're just a cog inside that system. But if you could look at that system and ask yourself the question of why am I doing this and how did they make this happen? Like there's always parts of me that just want to like, hey guys, I'm going on a hiatus for like 6 months. I'm going to go work at a fast food restaurant, like with these guys that really know what they're doing.
Right.
But like take everything that you do in life, no matter what job it is, there's something that you're learning that's going to apply to getting you where you want to be when you're older.
Yeah.
Every single job. In the weirdest way, it all makes sense for me, but like there's no job that you'll do that you won't, unless you limit yourself and you don't want to learn. But everything that you do is teaching you something that's going to get you to a different place in life or a better place if you allow it to.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of things, maybe not a lot, but a few key things that really separate those who become very successful, just in my limited experience, from those who either end up giving up or aren't able to make it as big. And I think one of those is their perspective and their mindset, right? And that sounds cliche, but I'm just going to use you as an example. Yeah. The way that you viewed cleaning toilets in your first job at 14 years old and the excitement to be able to just do a good job at that. And then you think about, your perspective on fraternity life, where a lot of people just go and they use it as an outlet and they're just, they're going to drink and they're going to have fun or they're going to, whatever the case may be. But you took the approach and you said, well, I have to learn all this stuff about people. This is going to help me develop relationships and maintain them. And I'm going to move forward and it's going to teach me like delayed gratification, where I'm going to put in all this work now. And then later, after I clean the bathrooms, my bathroom's going to be cleaned.
Yeah.
And I just think that's, if everybody were able to have that mindset, everybody might believe that they could be an entrepreneur because they're just looking at the world in a unique and different way compared to the norm.
Yeah. But thanks for bringing that perspective there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. For those who don't know, it's literally 9, almost 40 PM on a Tuesday night. And and I've loved every second of it. Again, so many lessons, and just, you made a point in the beginning, you're from Indian Hill, you've grown up, you've had, some might call it a cookie cutter lifestyle from kindergarten. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think you're one of the most humble guys. I think when we first had our phone call, the first question on your mind was you asked me, what made you want to start this podcast? And that struck me so immediately as, again, I use the word, but it's unique. And it meant a lot to me. And I think your authenticity shows in the way that you tell your stories and how much you care about your business. And I think it's the reason it's been able to thrive as much as it has. So all the respect in the world from my end. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So thank you so much for taking the time. And I'm excited to present this story to anybody who wants to be able to hear it, because I think people deserve to hear it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.